And hello, this is Dr. D tonight. But for tonight, let's just say it's D and you, D and me. And I'm going to talk to you tonight, which might seem to be a little bit of rambling, but I want to meet you where you're at, and I want you to meet me where I'm at. When I started these talks, which some people call sermons, many years ago, I did so with the idea that I was going to use my life experience to share, to help people on their life journey. Not that you would have to always agree with me, but that I would give you something to think about, and maybe something that would unlock the door for you. And we're going to talk about many things tonight. One of the questions that I'm going to pose to you is this: why would somebody in their 70s decide to be transgender? Why? It makes no sense. Is it because they would want to put up with the stigma? They would like to put up with the rejection. They would like to put up with the heartbreak of choosing a marginalized group within a marginalized group? Why? Why would they do that? Do you know, I often say, we don't teach what we know. We teach who we are. Let me say that again. We don't teach what we know. We teach who we are. I think Maya Angelou put it so eloquently when she said, people will forget what you've said, but they will remember how you made them feel. And I remember and think about in my lifetime just recently, somebody came up to me, and I honestly had no clue who they were. And they said, "You changed my life." And of course, my stock answer is, "No, you changed your life." And I'm still curious as to what they're going to say. And they reached back in time, and they shared a quote that I had shared with them over 10 years ago. And they reminded me of the incident, which I had long forgotten. And they said, "What you said, the way you made me feel, made me realize more about myself, and made me realize that I really am important, that I really am the CEO of my life, that I really am the one to take charge of my life." We all come to this planet with gifts. Sad thing is, once we get here, public opinion, church, politics, religion, social, economic pressures, we soon get beat to where we don't know what our purpose is in being here. And we end up just showing up, not even really showing up, but almost being a walking dead person, walking around, just waiting till our life is over. Not living with purpose, not really living with life. We're so caught up in looking for this thing called love. And it's so elusive to us that we really, most people never find it. So what is part of my journey? Now, whether you're gay, whether you're transgender, whether you're lesbian, all of these various letters in the LGBTQ, whether it's nature or whether it's nurture, whether it's an overbearing parent, whether it was sexual molestation when you were younger, or a combination of all of it. I don't have an answer for all that. I just want to share a little bit of my story with you. When I was maybe 2, maybe 3, there was a little girl in the neighborhood that I played with. I don't even remember her name. She was an African-American girl. And she wanted me to meet her mama. And I remember this just like it was yesterday, that she took me to meet her mama and took me by the hand. And she said, and my name was Stephen at the time, right? And she said, "Mama, this is my girlfriend Stevie. She just looks like a boy." Now, I never saw the little girl again. And all these years I've wondered, is it because I was white? Or was it because I was a girl that looked like a boy? And if I was a girl that looked like a boy, then what did this little girl know energetically about me that I didn't know at the time? So as life goes on, I go through my various parts of things in my life. I don't play with dolls, I don't play with trucks, I don't even really ever remember playing with toys in a very abusive life that I grew up in. But I do remember that I always knew I was different. And I always felt I didn't belong. Didn't belong to the family that I was with. I just didn't belong. And most of my life, when it comes to prayer, I prayed that I would just die. Because my life was filled with such pain, such misery, and such suffering. Now, while I understand that there will always be some kind of pain in our life, but suffering is optional. Yes, we can feel the pain, but we don't have to suffer. Suffering is an option. So throughout my early life and even teenage years and even 20s and 30s and so on, the thought being in my mind that I was different was there. And I knew I wasn't like the other boys. And I had no interest in running around a baseball field. I had no interest in going hunting with my grandfather or really going fishing. I had no interest in those kind of things. But I did have an interest in sitting and playing piano. And I did have an interest in the church things that we were doing. My grandma and I went to church somewhere every night of the week. And she was a gospel music artist and a singer. And we were what was called Pentecostal holy rollers at the time. So the women wore no makeup. Of course, the men wore no makeup either. And if it was fun, if it was certain kind of food, or if it was fashionable, then it was called sin. So trying to please God, any time that I would think that I was different, I would cry and I would repent. And I remember as a teenager, that when I was living with my grandparents at our church, that every Sunday night we had an altar call, and I would find myself down at the altar praying and crying, asking for forgiveness for my sins, because I didn't want to go to hell. And yet I wasn't going to movies. I wasn't smoking, drinking, chewing, going with girls or boys that do. I was praying and singing and being in church. But yet I was so afraid of who I was. Wanting to know love, wanting to be love, and not really knowing what love was, but yet singing about love all the time. I remember as I got older, and this is literally not an exaggeration, because it's basically a book a day. I took one whole year. I was so hurt inside that I read close to 300 books on love during that year, trying to know and understand, what is this thing called love? Is love a choice? Is it an emotion? It's supposed to be great. There's how many millions of songs sung about it. We're told that God is love, and if this is what it is, how come I'm missing out? Why am I missing out on this? Not understanding that the authentic self of who we are is love. And the ego self of us, the edge God's out self of us, is always keeping us wanting, searching, needing, being a victim rather than a victor. Not understanding that at all. And not understanding this, that the ego always speaks first and always speaks the loudest. Didn't know the difference between ego and authentic self. Didn't know that at all. Nobody had ever taught me that. And if they would have tried to teach me, it would have been cuckoo. So as life moves on, and I have various careers, and I begin to try to find my sexuality, because your sexuality is different than your gender identification. And this is something that people get so misunderstood. They think that if you identify as a transgender woman, that you want to be a woman and sexually you want to be with a man. And what I've learned on this particular journey and experienced with some of my transgender women friends, they like women, and their sexuality that they enjoyed before they had their transition is still the same. They liked women before they were women, and they still like women. That doesn't change on that. Now, for me, my attraction on a sexual level never really was towards women. And in fact, in my teens and 20s, my attraction towards men and women had nothing to do with sex, but actually to do with the aesthetics of how one presented themselves. I was attracted to gentlemen, and I was attracted to gracious ladies. Not always women, but ladies that had it together and looked like they were classy and finished. However, when my sexual life came into play, I began to have sex with men. But here's a catcher on this. I remember I was in my early to mid 30s. And that was the first time that I consensually had sex with a man. And I said to the man, he mentioned something about being gay. I said, why do we have to have a label on who we have sex with or who we love? Why can't we just be human beings with the ability to express our love in a sexual way without having to slap a label on it? We get so label conscious. And I'm not too sure whether it's when we get that label conscious, whether they're inclusive, we're being inclusive or we're being exclusive. Because wouldn't it be like almost like a nirvana or a utopia if we were with a partner that wanted to be with us? Simply us, no matter what our gender was, no matter what our genitals looked like, but they saw into the heart of the person of who we are. And when they said, I love you, that we really got what it was, because it wasn't about the breast or about the penis or the vagina or whatever. It was the essence of who we are on the inside, that essence of spirit that goes on forever. And as the body changes and gets wrinkled and we're all Botoxing to the hilt and doing all the things to make ourselves look a certain way, it is the spirit. It is that internal spirit that is the very core of who we are, and it is in that spirit that is the gift that we bring to the planet, to the universe, that we find that we've stripped away so that we could present a facade. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying, because obviously, look at me. I believe in looking good and presenting a certain way. But for my life, if I'm going to spend the time looking a certain way like this, I'm also going to make sure I'm spending the time that I'm developing the inner person of who I am. That how do I become more loving? How do I become more an extension of the light? How do I become more of an expression of hope on this planet? In other words, how do I put a lipstick and mascara on my spirit too, to make it shine? So through this journey, I knew I wasn't gay. It didn't feel right. Within each of us is an internal thermometer that tells us what is right for us. We come to the planet with sacred contracts, and each with our own particular school of things to learn, our particular curriculum that we're learning while we're here. And yet we try to learn other people's curriculums and be like they are, and it doesn't work. We become frustrated, and that's where that ego mind gets involved. I got to be like this one, like that. No, be you, but what does you look like? What are you? And then we get trapped into well, if you're gay, God doesn't love you. And if you're queer, lesbian, God doesn't love you. So the church gets involved, and we get into guilt, we get into shame, and I've often said this in my talks, that guilt and shame never did anybody any good, period. Guilt and shame never kept anybody on a long-term sobriety. You may try to guilt somebody into changing behavior, but it's a short-term behavior if they're doing it from a guilt part. And they're in a state of misery. So what it's about? It's about coming to that place in yourself that you can say, I am enough. I'm enough, and you begin to see the God in yourself. You begin to see the acceptance of yourself. Because we spend so much time wanting other people to accept us. But how can we get somebody to accept what we can't accept ourselves? You know, I talk about the intimacy, which is into me see. How can I expect you to see into me and me see into you if I'm covering up to myself what it is that I'm trying to ask you to see, or that's all muddy? Doesn't make sense. But yet we do it over and over and over. So why would somebody my age decide to make the statement publicly, or make the statement even privately, that I'm a transgender woman? Ouch. That stings. I know there's political leaders that at times have mentioned that you send your kids to school one way and they come back another way. You know, you send your child to school as Stephen and comes back Stephanie. That absolutely is not true. People that are transgender and transition, do you think they just have transitioned overnight? Do you think they've just transitioned in a year's time? What I'm wanting you to see and understand is the struggle with oneself, to admit to oneself where they're at. Because, my friends, the biggest lies that we tell are the lies that we tell ourselves. It's not the lies that we tell other people. The biggest lies that we tell are the lies that we tell ourselves. And the reason we don't know how to give and receive love in our lives is because of the lies that we tell ourselves and the lack of intimacy that we have within our own self. Ouch, that stings. I have to laugh because people want you to tell the truth until you do. They say, no, that's too much truth. That is the truth. That is the truth. You know, I was on the stage doing shows, singing, and was billed one of the famous in female impersonation. And if people would see me dressed, I'd say, oh, these are my work clothes. These are my work clothes. This isn't really me. It's my work clothes. And yet, when I was dressed, there was a certain acceptance and a certain feeling that went with it, and a certain completeness that went with it. But because of social pressures, religious pressures, stigma, no. You can't. And not wanting to be a freak, just kept pushing down whatever emotion I was having to deal with any of this, and numbing it through drugs, and at one time through alcohol, and yes, numbing it through sex, so I wouldn't have to talk to myself about all this. So, a little over a year ago, well, let me back up. When I was in my 50s, I casually would say sometimes to friends, because I was entertaining at different clubs and things at that time, the finest in female impersonation. I'd say, you know, when I get older, I'm going to live as a woman, because people treat older women a lot nicer than they do older men. And in America, that is true. In America, by and large, we don't revere age. We're youth chasers. A lot of wisdom in age if we would stop and listen. And some of my friends would laugh, and some of my friends would say, "Oh, girl, you're already a woman," and we just laugh and blow it off. And sometimes it would hurt when they would say that. But you know, sometimes you hurt when there's an element of truth into something that somebody's saying. So if somebody says something to you and you feel a little twinge of hurt, take a look at that. Use that as just an awareness, not as a judgment, but as an awareness, to see if maybe there's an element of truth in that, because of course, being a minister, I still quote the Bible, and the Bible says you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And that is so true. So on this journey, a little over a year ago, or maybe almost 2 years ago, somewhere along the line, it happened. I was in my 70s, and I had given up being an entertainer. I had given up wearing the dresses and the wigs and the lipstick, and didn't do Halloween or any of those things. Just was gonna be content with being a gay man fitting in with that title that really didn't fit anywhere either. That was kind of what would you call it, an eccentric older gay man. And yet that wasn't comfortable. That wasn't real. But hey, I don't have that many more years to live in my life. So let's do what's comfortable enough for the status quo, and that I'm not gonna run into any roadblocks. I'm not gonna run into, I don't have to really live out loud. I can just be comfortable and live in the shadows. You know, how do I put it? When I walk into a room now, I know there's a seat at the table for me. Before, when I would walk into a room, I was always looking for a place to blend in, maybe over to the side, maybe to the back of the room, whatever. But when I walk into a room now, it's not with an arrogance, but it's with the confidence that I belong in that room. I belong in that group of people. I'm there to listen, and I'm there to be heard, and I'm there to be valued, just as I value those that are in that room. Not to be cast in the shadows. And yes, that's all internal. And you may say that being transgender is a mental disease, or being gay even is a mental disease. And I'm going to agree with you to this extent. When you don't have the courage to be whoever it is you are, it causes you such mental anguish, and in turn such a depression, that you make unhealthy choices. However, when you have the courage to be whoever it is and show up and to let life live through you, then you begin to find that you not only love, but you attract that love back to you. And whatever it has been that you're seeking comes flooding back to you in your life. And the happiness and the joy that you find. Now, I'm not saying that you're blissful and living in a state of euphoria all the time. Yes, you're still going to have struggles. You're still going to have when things don't go well. But that internal dialogue that you have becomes the basis for your strength. And you begin to understand that some things, it's just what it is. And yes, this soon will pass, because you have a sense of who you are. Sense of who you are. So, on this journey, this transformative journey of mine, learning so many things about myself, learning so many things about others, learning so many things about the universe and creator and this godness that is total loving. It's such an incredible journey of freedom. Such an incredible journey of restoration back to whoever it was that I came here as a child of innocence with. So, what am I saying to you? You want to know what love is? Start by being honest with who you are to yourself. What am I going to call it? Radical honesty. Radical honesty. And in being radically honest with yourself about yourself, make it okay for you to be you. And make it okay for you to love you. Because when you begin to have that love for yourself, which is an honest estimation of yourself, you begin to set yourself free. And as you begin to set yourself free, you quit playing small, and you begin to see yourself as the child of God that you are. You begin to understand the light that you are. And as you begin to understand the light that you are, you shine so bright that the darkness around you is dispelled by that light. And others are also encouraged by your behavior and your presence to begin to share that light also. Church, we used to sing this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. So why would a person in their 70s, rather than shrink and be the norm, it's because they finally begin to realize how amazing they really are. I want you to realize how amazing you really are. It's been a different talk. Been a bit of a little longer talk. But I feel this was a needed talk because there's something within this talk for each of you that have been drawn to listen to it. Some of you haven't taken the time or didn't want to take the time to know any transgendered people, or any gay people, or anybody different than you and your us four no more. And some of you that are identifying as transgender are still in the stage of hating yourself for being who you're being. And I'm just saying that you are who you are. Take note of that. And give up the hate. Give up the hate realm. And begin to embrace the wonderful treasure that you are. Because when you embrace the wonderful treasure that you are, then the gift of who you are, the purpose of who you are on the planet begins to shine. You can't be something and then be cutting it down at the same time. So take what you can today. Remember this. Remember this. Kindness. Kindness is the language that the deaf can hear. And kindness is the language that the blind really can see. So today, be kind to yourself. That's where it starts. And then be kind to others. And as you walk in the way of kindness, it becomes your superpower. And love becomes the byproduct of it. Until next time when you watch one of my other videos, this is Dee, or some of you know me as Dr. D, saying I'm sending love, compassion to you. You can watch my videos on my YouTube channel, Reverend Dr. D. Calmet, or catch me on the Facebook, any of the social medias. I welcome your comments. Some of you may feel the need that you may have to write something derogatory. Write it to me and get it out. Some of you will write me and say, you know what, you really helped me. And if I did that, and I caused you to think today, I've done my job. Okay, until next time.